What is going on, guys? It's your boy. We're making a deck tech video today. Making a deck tech video on one of my Magic the Gathering Commander decks. Today we're looking at my Post the Enchanter, which is obviously Zur the Enchanter with the Post Malone treatment. Pretty cool. And we're looking at the deck. So, hope you guys enjoy. If you guys like this type of content, you guys want me to make more deck techs, let me know. And I should also mention, this is in no way a perfect deck. This is just something that I built that I have fun with, and you know, it works. It's functional. It's pretty strong, I would say. But it can obviously be improved. And in fact, if you guys have any suggestions or recommendations, let me know. But without further ado, let's get into the deck tech. So like I said, this is Post the Enchanter, Zur the Enchanter. The ability here saying, whenever Post the Enchanter attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with mana value 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Which is a pretty powerful ability. So obviously this deck is going to be just chock full of value from cheap enchantments that I can tutor up very quickly. And if you guys have played Commander, especially in these colors, you know there's a lot of good enchantments for 3 or less. And there's a lot of ways you can go about this type of deck, but I decided it would be really cool to do a discard theme deck with zombies. So we will get cracking. I've separated the cards into kind of what they do. Obviously, we're not going to look at the lands, because every deck has lands. You guys know what to expect. We've got a command tower. We've got some of the good, tri-lands and oh my goodness, I cannot talk. 2 lands, all that stuff. But first, we'll look at the zombie payoffs. So you might be thinking, why are you building zombies? Zur is not a zombie. Well, we will get to that. I promise. It will make sense. But first, let's just look at the payoffs. First, we have Stitcher Supplier, zombie herself, but also loads up your graveyard with 3 cards from the top whenever it enters or dies. Really powerful effect there. Next up, we have Ratatabrick. Other zombies have Vigilance, and whenever a legendary creature dies, we create a token of it, but it's a 2/2 zombie. Guys, that means we can have 2 Zur posts, whatever. We can have 2 posts. If we just kill our own post, we can have 2 posts, one of them being a zombie. How cool is that? Just really, really cool. Pumps all my zombies, makes zombies. Up next, obviously, if you're playing zombies in these 3 colors, you're going to want to have Verena. A lot of people might ask, why is Verena not the commander? Because it's a discard deck, I like the ability to tutor up my discard outlets, the enchantments that cause that. So she's really good for like a just straight up zombies deck. This is a zombie discard deck, so that's why she's not the commander, although she could very easily substitute in for the commander. Up next, we have God Eternal Bantu. When it enters the battlefield, I can sacrifice any number of permanents and then draw that many cards. And when he dies, he just goes right back to the third, into the library, 3rd from the top, which is huge because when paired with Ratatabrick, if he dies while Ratatabrick is there, I'm going to get a second one of him, and he's going to go back into my library, which is huge. And sacrificing permanents when we're making a bunch of 2/2 zombies is really, really easy. And he's a sack outlet for my other legendary creatures. Huge. Very huge. So, very good card right there. And we'll get to the token creation, by the way. We're not there yet. But Death Baron, easy include in any zombie deck. Give all my zombies a pump and Death Touch. Another easy include. I'm sure you guys knew this was coming. Gary, not as strong in a 3-color deck, but really good nonetheless with the Drain effect. And finally, we have Wayward Servant. Whenever there's zombies enter the battlefield, we drain for 1. Very, very strong because we're going to be creating a lot of zombies. So those are our zombie payoffs, but how are we getting our zombies? What are our discard outlets? Because I mentioned this is a discard deck. Let's look at some of the discard outlets and zombie generators. First up, we have Curator of Mysteries. Whenever I cycle or discard, I get to scry 1. So this is more of a discard payoff than a zombie payoff, or a zombie creator, I should say. But still really strong because the whole theme of this deck is discard, discard, discard. So we're going to be scrying a bunch. We're always going to be knowing what we're going to get next, which is huge. Next, we have a discard outlet in Scourge Familiar. Really easy way to get mana. If my hand is full of useless stuff, boom, boom, boom. Discard it all, make a bunch of mana. If we can cheat this guy out early, then we have mana covered for the rest of the game pretty much, because we have so many ways to draw cards that we can always discard to this to add mana. Up next is Hollow One. Whenever we're discarding, he costs 2 less. So usually he becomes a 0 mana 4/4, which, why would you not want to include that? He doesn't synergize with the zombies, but goodness, my camera work is really shaky. I should invest in a tripod. Anyway, why would you not want to include him? A free 4/4. I mean, if we can get this out turn 2 or turn 3, we just have a free 4/4. Sure, it doesn't synergize with other zombies, but it can be a chump blocker. It can be a threatening, position on the battlefield. Very good. Okay, we have the first of our tutorable effects with Zer's effect, Curse of the Restless Dead. We enchant a player, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, we create a 2/2 black zombie with Decayed. Now, it is a little unfortunate that it has Decayed, because obviously the Decayed zombies are a lot worse than the regular zombie tokens, but a zombie nonetheless. Really huge. We can always sacrifice it to get some benefits. So up next is Drakehaven. Now, Drakehaven isn't producing zombies, but it is producing drakes. 2/2 blue drakes with flying. And in the right matchup, this is huge. Also tutorable. And, say we're going up against a deck that has a lot of flyers. We need flyers ourselves. Drakehaven is huge. Up next is Mystic Redaction. Whenever we discard, opponent has to mill, and it's tutorable once again. Curse of Shallow Graves. Once again, another tutorable curse. And whenever a player attacks the enchanted player, that player adds a 2/2 black zombie. So not only can it get people off of my back and encourage everybody else to attack that person, but it also will reward me because I'm the one with the zombie payoffs. Now, if I'm playing against another zombie deck, maybe don't pull this out. But that's what's so great about Zer, is I can choose, what I'm tutoring for. So in the right deck, or up against the right deck, if I'm playing against a zombie deck, I'm not going to tutor for this. Or I'll put it on the zombie player so he can't benefit from it. Dying to Serve. Whenever we discard one or more cards, we create a tapped 2/2 zombie. Unfortunately, this effect only triggers once per turn, but we're still creating zombies, and once again, tutorable. Another tutorable enchantment. Zombies I control have menace, and we can exile our cards from our graveyard to create those zombies. Up next is Necromancer's Stockpile. We discard a creature card to draw a card, and so not only is it a discard outlet, but if the creature was a zombie, we get a zombie. So really, really good there. Up next is Lazatop Chancellor. Now this is not tutorable because it's not an enchantment, but whenever we discard a card, we may pay 1 to amass 2. Amassing, if you guys don't know, you create a zombie army and then put that many counters on it. So amass 2, we create a 0/0 zombie army and put 2 1/1 counters on it. Or if we already have a zombie army, we just put the 2 counters on it, which is huge because we're getting a bunch of zombie payoffs. Up next is Rotting Regisaur. It itself is a zombie. It's a 7/6, which is really good. It does have some downside. At the beginning of my upkeep, I have to discard a card. But that upside in this deck that downside is upside because we want to be discarding stuff. Then we have Bone Miser, zombie himself. Whenever we discard, depending on what we discard, we get a ton of value, which is huge because all we're doing is discarding. So up next, let's look at card advantage, because you're probably thinking, hey, you're discarding a lot of cards. How are you getting cards? Well, first we have Faithful Mending. Gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. So this one isn't necessarily card advantage, but it is loading our graveyard with what exactly we want to be loaded in it. And we're getting card selection. So really good card there. Up next we have Baleful Force. Pretty expensive, but we get an extra draw every turn. Who wouldn't want that? Up next is Greed. Now this is not tutorable because it costs 4, but it lets us Pay a black and 2 life to draw a card. Up next is Tortured Existence. We get to choose and discard a creature card to return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. This is huge with all the discard payoffs, and again, it's not card advantage, but it is loading our graveyard, which we use pretty heavily in this deck. Up next is Entomb. It is an instant, and we get to search our library for a card, put it into our graveyard, and then shuffle, which is huge because, again, we have a lot of ways to interact with our graveyard, so loading our graveyard up is basically like putting it in our hand. Up next, another tutorable enchantment, Staggering Insight. Enchanted creature has +1/+1 lifelink, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So, because Zur is flying, and oftentimes he's loaded up with protection, that's just a really, really good way to, get extra cards in our hand. Up next is Palace Siege, and we can either return cards from our graveyard to our hand, which gives us card advantage, or drain. So it really depends on the matchup. Unfortunately not tutorable, but really good card nonetheless. Up next we have Phyrexian Reclamation. Return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Tutorable, card advantage, what's not to like? Combat Research, another one that whenever we deal combat damage with our enchanted creature, we draw a card, and it is tutorable once again. Oversold Cemetery, which says if we have 4 or more creature cards in our graveyard, we return one to our hand. We're always going to be hitting that threshold pretty early on, so this is a fantastic way to get repeatable effects. We can put stuff from our hand into the graveyard, get it back with Oversold Cemetery, and then put it back into the graveyard again for, very easy benefits. And then finally, the best card advantage card in this deck is Rhystic Study. You guys already know what it does. Really, really strong in Commander. Auto include, obviously. Up next, we will look at the enchantment payoffs because, as you've seen, we're playing a lot of enchantments. So let's look at the enchantment payoffs. All that glitters. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact or artifact or enchantment. It's going to be a lot, and this is also tutorable. Next is Hannah, Ship's Navigator. We get to return artifacts or enchantments from our graveyard to our hand. So if anybody removes them. Now this is an MDFC card. And the reason this is in the deck, or what this is rather, is we actually have 2 possible commanders. Now Zur Eternal Schemer is definitely the weaker of the 2 compared to Post the Enchanter, but I thought it was still really cool to include him in the deck, and I wanted him to be a possible commander, so we hard-sleeved him up, and we put in the MDFC to represent whichever one is not the commander of that game. Up next is Dance of the Manse. X, white, blue, and we return up to X artifacts or non-aura enchantments with each with mana value X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So once again, we can load up our graveyard with a ton of good stuff, then get it all back. Or if somebody has an enchantment board wipe, get it all back. And if X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures, which synergizes really well with the Zur Eternal Schemer. So definitely a good card there. Up next is Mirror Maid, which just becomes whatever the best artifact or enchantment is on the battlefield. A lot of times when I'm playing this deck, I find that the best artifact or enchantment is my own artifact or enchantment, usually enchantment. But if it's not, if somebody else has something really good, then I can attack him with Post and be like, all right, cool, now my Mirror Maid is whatever I need it to be. So obviously that's a really good card in this deck. Up next is Underworld Dreams. It's tutorable, and it drains 1, or it doesn't drain, but it pings for 1 every time somebody draws a card. So pretty strong. I mean, it's not game-breaking or anything. It's never the first card I'm tutoring in this deck. But if somebody is playing some sort of wheel deck or some sort of draw all my cards deck, it can be pretty useful. Up next is Michiko's Reign of Truth. The first two, I give a creature +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment, which is usually a lot, and then it flips into a creature that gets, which power and toughness is equal to the number of artifacts or enchantments, which is huge. Up next is Skyblessed Samurai. It's a 6 and a white for a 4/4 flyer, but it costs 1 less for each enchantment, and it itself is an enchantment creature. Now, it isn't tutorable because its converted mana cost is 7, but 9 times out of 10 when I'm casting this from my hand, I'm paying 1 mana for it, and a 1 mana 4/4 flyer is pretty good. Next is Night Howler. Night Howler and Enchanted Creature each get +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards. We're already discarding a lot, so that's just really powerful. And then we have Blind Obedience. Our copy of Blind Obedience is Russian. So if anybody speaks Russian, let me know in the comments if my translation is accurate. But it basically it makes it so that your opponent's stuff comes in tapped, which is more relevant than you think. So, mana rocks coming in tapped is huge because they can't use them that turn. Creatures with haste coming in tapped, basically negating haste, is huge. So, really, really solid there. Up next, and probably the thing I need to filter out the most of, is my protection spells. We probably need less protection in the deck and more zombie payoffs, but either way. First up is General's Enforcer. Legendary humans have Indestructible, which synergizes really well with this legendary human. That's really the only thing we care about is the fact that legendary humans have Indestructible. So honestly, this is one of the earliest cuts in the deck if I'm cutting something. Up next is Dire Tactics. Exile target creature. If you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. Well, we almost always are going to control a creature because post the Enchanter is a human. Did I say creature before I meant human? Of course, we're going to control a creature. Up next is Cut Down. 1 black, destroy something with total power and toughness 5 or less. Really, really good early game. Good for shutting down certain commanders with low power toughness. Just a solid card for getting rid of weak but really powerful in effect cards. Up next is the only board wipe in the deck. Descend upon the Sinful to exile all creatures. And then if we have 4 or more card types, we create a 4/4 angel out of it. So not bad. I'm really only casting this when I'm desperate because the zombies, when I play this deck, tend to get out of hand pretty quickly. So, yeah. Up next is Seal of Doom. Destroy target creature. It can't be generated. Now, why is this in the deck rather than a different kill spell? Because it's tutorable. That's really the only reason. I can attack in with post, tutor it out, and then sacrifice it instantly to destroy a creature. Up next is Negate. Counter target non-creature spell. I'm in blue. I might as well throw in 1 counter. Next is Citizen's Arrest. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker until it leaves. And it is tutorable. So, we can go and search for this, bring it out, and exile something strong. Temporary Lockdown. Basically, a board wipe in a lot of ways. Exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. So oftentimes against other token decks, this is a board wipe. If I'm playing this against like a Goblins deck, a really, really fast Goblins deck or something, or a really fast Humans deck, something with that's creating a lot of tokens, or a Treasures deck even, where I don't take too much of a hit with my zombies, but they're going to take more of a hit with their stuff. Up next is Eidolon of Rhetoric. It is also tutorable because it's an enchantment creature, and it makes it so that players can't cast more than 1 spell. Why not shut things down? Right? Up next is Brave the Sands. Give all my creatures vigilance and let them block an additional creature each combat. This is huge because, again, I'm creating a bunch of small zombies. So if they're already chump blocking, why not double chump block? That is huge. In small creature decks, this card is way more powerful than it seems on the surface. So definitely an include there. Up next is Propaganda. I know what people are going to say. This is not a prison deck. It does have some prison cards in it, but it's not a prison deck. Propaganda just makes it so that people can't attack me, because I'm not playing a lot of board wipes, so people are usually going to have their stuff. And Propaganda just makes it so that they can't attack me very efficiently. Up next is Benevolent Blessing. We're going to protect from other people's removal, because this gives enchanted creature protection from a chosen color. And it does not affect the auras and equipments that are already attached to it. So I can name any color, even if it's one of these three, and the enchantments I currently have will not fall off of him. Or another creature if I want to protect another creature, but usually that's going on post. Next is Circle of Despair. We can pay 1 and sacrifice a creature to prevent all damage from to a creature or player from any one source. And this can work in a lot of cool ways. Again, we're creating a lot of zombies, so we have expendable resources with sacrifice. So if somebody's attacking me for lethal, I can pay 1 and sack a creature. And this is not a tap effect, so I can do this multiple times. So if they're attacking me, now if they're attacking me with 20 creatures, I've got to have 20 mana and 20 of my own creatures, and at that point, why am I not just blocking? But if they're, bolting one of my creatures, or if they're trying to hit with a trampler or something like that, this is a really good way to prevent that damage. Up next is Security Bypass. And this kind of goes with card advantage too, because it lets me connive, which is technically card selection, not advantage. But in this deck, the discard is pretty relevant. And it makes it so that as long as enchanted creature is attacking alone, it can't be blocked. So they can't attack Zur as long as he's the only one attacking. Usually when I'm setting up my board, he is the only one attacking. So making it so he can't be blocked so that I don't have to be fearful of bigger creatures is huge. Next, let's look at Ramp. Ramp is not too heavy in this deck, although we do have other ways of producing mana. But first is Post Citadel. Now, you're probably asking, how is this Ramp? Well, because we can cast spells from the top of our library without paying mana. And to me, that kind of sounds like Ramp, right? You're not paying mana. Yeah, you can't cast the stuff in your hand, but oftentimes we don't have a hand with this deck anyway, if we've discarded it all. And even if we do, maybe we don't want to play anything in there. Maybe we want to keep those things to be discarded later. So this just makes it so that we can very easily cast things still, and we don't have to pay mana for them. So that is huge. Up next is Restoration of Eiganjo. Ramps for planes. Lets us discard and lets us return, and then it exiles into a 3/4, which is just pretty good. And it's a 3 mana enchantment, so that's tutorable. Relic of Legends, add 1 mana of any color, or tap a legendary creature to add 1 mana of any color. So, really, really strong with legendary creatures. Otherwise, just a decent mana source. Azorius Signet adds mana, you already know. Soul Ring, Auto Include, and Arcane Signet. So the mana rocks we have are not the best in this deck. Like I said in the beginning of this video, the deck isn't perfect, but it is functional. And finally, the last little section here is just decent cards in this color that I don't really want to cut right now, but they might get cut later. First is Jace, Architect of Thought. Just insane value. We get to search another player's library and take their best card if we get to ultimate him, and he protects us until that happens. Mind Slicer. When it dies, each player discards their hand. So if I'm feeling like everybody else is getting to discard and I don't get to discard, or other way around. If I feel like I'm the only one discarding and everybody else is missing out, I can force everybody to discard by either sacrificing this, or it can just be a threat. I can be like, hey, I want to discard stuff. You don't. So don't kill this. Up next is Windborn Muse. I am not a prison deck, but he makes it so that things can't attack us unless they pay 2 for each one. So shuts down a lot of heavy creature decks, big stuff, Makes it so that people have to spend their resources, pay their taxes. So, and then finally, before the lands, Kami's Obscura Oculus makes it so that an attacking creature can't be blocked and connives, and if I'm attacking with 2, then that other one with lesser power gains double strike. So pretty good for if I'm attacking in with multiple or with just 1 with post, because protecting post while he attacks is pretty important, because I do have to attack to get that trigger. And then finally, we'll just very briefly take a look at lands. Most of these are basic. I don't have a ton of money to just spend on really good lands. First one, of course, is Fabled Passage. We can sack it to thin our deck out, search for a basic land. Orzhov Basilica, just a decent dual land. Got a basic island, got a command tower. Basics, more basics. Temple of Enlightenment is next. So we get to scry when that comes in, which can be pretty relevant in the deck that really wants to filter and draw and discard and all that stuff. Caves of Koilos, of course, comes in untapped, and yeah, you're going to take the burn from it, but that's not really an issue. I mean, you got 40 life in Commander, you might as well use it. Skybridge Towers, we can get some card advantage with this later on if we don't need the mana anymore, which oftentimes later in the game we don't, because we have multiple ways of cheating things into play. Ooh, that's a really cool art. You're welcome. Dismal Backwater just gains us a life when it enters. Adarkar Wastes, same principle as the other one. It's going to deal 1 damage, but that is hardly a problem. Skycloud Expanse, just a good dual land, comes in untapped and taps for either color, essentially. Yes, it says pay 1 and add 2, but typically that basically just means you're tapping 2 lands for 2 mana. Then we've got an Irrigated Farmland. We can cycle it away, which is relevant because cycling is a discard outlet. Prairie Stream, we have to control 2 or more basics, but then it comes in untapped. Waterfront District is another one we can sacrifice for a card. And, of course, we have the Raffine's Tower, which taps for all 3 of our colors and has cycling. So, yeah, that is the deck tech, guys. Let me know if you guys like this sort of content. We can do another one. Give me your guys' suggestions for cards I should put in this deck, cards I should take out, what has worked for you guys in the past if you've played this deck before or played against it before, or just what you think might work for it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you guys like the Magic content, because I'm going to be trying and making more. And thank you guys so much for watching.